Palm Beach County is the kind of place that looks perfect on a postcard. Palms sway lazily in the ocean breeze, pastel-colored houses line the streets, and sunlight glints off the windshields of cars that seem too polished to have ever seen a gravel road. On weekends, families bike along wide sidewalks, retirees stroll with little white dogs, and sprinklers arc gracefully over emerald green lawns that never seem to grow a weed. It was here, in one of the county's many homeowners association communities, that my wife and I decided to settle. We thought we were buying into peace of mind, safety, order, and an environment where neighbors looked out for each other. What we didn't realize at the time was that we were also signing up for a second government, the HOA. At first, it seemed harmless enough. The association maintained the landscaping, fixed the community pool when it needed repairs, and sent out cheerful newsletters with clip art of palm trees. We paid our dues, smiled at the neighbors, and enjoyed the illusion of perfection. But as time passed, the cracks began to show. The HOA wasn't just about maintaining beauty, it was about enforcing conformity. Every month, without fail, a few unlucky homeowners would get violation notices. These weren't polite reminders, they were official, stern emails citing infractions of the covenants. Too many weeds, a lawn ornament out of proportion, a holiday decoration left up 2 days too long. The fines weren't devastating on their own, but the principle was. You could be punished for the smallest slip, and the association made sure you knew it. I had always managed to avoid those emails. I kept my grass clipped to regulation height, rolled the trash bin into the garage within hours of pickup, and double-checked that holiday lights were gone before the HOA's invisible deadline. I joked with my wife that I had become HOA trained, living in constant low-grade fear of an anonymous compliance officer cruising the streets in a white SUV with a clipboard. But no amount of vigilance can prevent the inevitable. It happened on the 4th of July weekend, of all times. The trash service was delayed because of the holiday. Normally, pickup happened around 8 a.m., and I'd roll the bin back in before I left for work. That day, though, the truck didn't come until afternoon. I rolled the bin back into the garage at 12:30 sharp, feeling satisfied that even with the delay, I was still within reason. 2 days later, the email landed in my inbox like a thunderbolt. Violation notice. Your trash receptacle remained visible from the street for 14 minutes after pickup on July 4th. This is a violation of Section 3.2b of the Community Standards, which requires that trash bins be stored out of sight immediately after collection. I read the words 3 times, sure I was missing something. 14 minutes? They had timed it? And on a holiday? I laughed at first, but the humor drained quickly when I saw the next line. Fine. $100, with additional fines possible upon further review. My wife leaned over my shoulder. This has to be a joke. It's not a joke, I said grimly. They time-stamped it. She shook her head. How could they even know? Were they sitting outside with a stopwatch? That was exactly what it felt like. Somewhere, someone had been watching, not just noticing, but recording, how long our trash bin sat on the curb. 14 minutes of freedom had apparently doomed us. I wanted to ignore it, but the email was clear. Respond by email within 5 days, or the fine would escalate. So I drafted a polite response, explaining the holiday delay, the late pickup, and my prompt action. I even attached a screenshot of the county's waste management schedule as proof. I hit send, thinking that common sense would prevail. I was wrong. What I didn't realize at the time was that this absurd violation would snowball into something far worse than a $100 fine. Because 2 weeks later, when the agenda for the monthly HOA meeting went out to every resident in the community, my wife and I opened the PDF to find our address listed in bold letters under the section titled, Violations to be voted on. And just like that, our 14-minute trash bin crime wasn't just between us and the HOA anymore. It was public knowledge, broadcast to the entire neighborhood like a scarlet letter nailed to our door. The HOA meeting agenda arrived in our inbox on a Wednesday morning. It was a routine email. Subject line: monthly meeting materials, August. Normally, I skimmed past these without much thought. They were full of dry topics like budget allocations, landscaping contracts, and vendor proposals. But this time, something caught my eye. Halfway down the PDF, under a bold heading marked violations to be voted on, there it was, our street address. My heart skipped a beat. At first I thought I was imagining it, so I leaned closer to the screen. But no, there it was in black and white, as official as it could be. Beside it, a short note: trash receptacle left visible after collection, vote required. I felt the blood drain from my face. They actually listed us, I whispered. My wife walked over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. What do you mean? Look, I pointed at the line. She bent down, scanning the page. Her jaw dropped. They published our address? For everyone? Yep, I said, still stunned. Right here, alongside budget approvals and pool repairs. Like we're some sort of public scandal. She slammed the laptop shut. That's disgusting. Why would they do that? Isn't this supposed to be private? I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning. A violation notice was one thing. A bureaucratic nuisance between us and the HOA. But this was different. This was exposure. Our address, our supposed crime, now broadcast to the entire neighborhood like a headline in the community newspaper. I imagined our neighbors scrolling through the agenda, pausing when they saw our street. Oh, that's the family who left their trash bin out too long. Suddenly, our reputation, our standing in this carefully manicured community, was tainted by 14 measly minutes of oversight. That night, we sat on the porch, staring at the glow of streetlights. It feels like defamation, my wife muttered. Like they're trying to shame us into compliance. Or make an example of us, I added. Like, see what happens if you step out of line. We fell silent, listening to the distant hum of cicadas. Blank. The next day, while walking the dog, I ran into our neighbor Carl from 2 doors down. He waved and then, after a pause, said, "Hey, I saw the agenda." My stomach tightened. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. Carl grimaced. "That's rough. Never seen them actually list someone's address before. Usually they just say, various violations." Exactly. I burst out. "Why us? Why now?" He shrugged. "Beats me. But it looks like they're making an example. You know how it is. They want to scare people." His words didn't comfort me. They only confirmed what I already suspected. We were being singled out. Later that evening, Maria from across the street stopped me while watering her flowers. "I'm sorry about the agenda," she said softly. "It doesn't seem right. Everyone knows mistakes happen." "Thanks," I said, managing a weak smile. She hesitated, then leaned in. "But, just so you know, some folks are talking." I frowned. "Talking? About the trash can? About, well, how the HOA handled it? Some people think it's over the top, others think rules are rules. You know how neighbors are." I nodded, though inside I burned. The idea that my neighbors, people I waved to in the mornings, people I exchanged holiday cookies with, were now discussing the microscopic details of my garbage routine made me feel exposed, humiliated. That night, I dug through the HOA documents, trying to find anything about privacy. Most of it was vague legalese, but nowhere did I see a clause that said they had the right to plaster our address in public agendas. Yes, they could issue violations. Yes, they could levy fines. But public shaming? That wasn't in the contract. The more I read, the angrier I became. It wasn't just about the $100 fine anymore. It was about dignity. About the right to handle disputes privately, not be paraded like criminals at a town square. Maybe we should talk to a lawyer, my wife suggested. Maybe, I said, or at least bring it up at the meeting. The thought of standing up at the HOA meeting made my stomach churn. Public speaking was bad enough. Doing it in front of a room full of neighbors who already knew our address, our violation, our supposed shame. It felt like walking into a lion's den. But what choice did we have? If we didn't speak up, the precedent would stand. Next time, it could be worse. Blank. Over the following days, the weight of the agenda hung over us. Every time I walked the dog, I felt eyes on me, real or imagined. Was that glance from the Johnsons a normal wave, or were they thinking, that's the trash can family? Was the silence from the couple down the street just routine, or were they quietly judging? It was like living under a spotlight. 14 minutes had become a scarlet mark on our suburban record. By Sunday, I knew what I had to do. I'm going to the meeting, I told my wife. She looked at me steadily. And you're going to say something? Yes, I said, though my voice wavered. Someone has to. Because if they can do this to us, they can do it to anyone. That night, lying awake, I rehearsed the words in my head. I would be calm, reasonable, but firm. I would ask them directly, is this standard procedure? Or are we being singled out? Because deep down, that was the real fear. Not just the violation, but the possibility that this was selective enforcement. That for reasons unknown, the board had chosen us to make an example. And if that were true, what else might they decide to enforce, and against whom? As I drifted towards sleep, I thought of the meeting room, the rows of neighbors, the board seated at their long table. And in the middle of it all, my address, printed on a page, a symbol of everything absurd and invasive about this system. It was no longer about trash cans. It was about privacy, dignity, and the strange little fiefdom that ruled our corner of Palm Beach. And I intended to challenge it. In the days leading up to the HOA meeting, our home turned into a miniature war room. The violation email and the agenda sat printed on the kitchen counter, side by side, like exhibits in a trial. My wife highlighted the phrases that seemed the most absurd, 14 minutes, visible from the street, violations to be voted on, while I scribbled notes in the margins. Every night after dinner, we'd sit at the table and rehearse possible scenarios. What if they say it's standard procedure? My wife asked. Then I'll ask why we're the first ones. Why hasn't anyone else's address been published before? And what if they say it's in the bylaws? Then I'll demand to see the clause. She tapped the papers with her pen. And what if they just ignore you? I sighed. Then at least it'll be on record that I objected. Silence feels like agreement, and I won't give them that satisfaction. During the day, I scoured the internet for answers. I typed searches like, HOA violation privacy Florida law, and Palm Beach HOA public shaming. The results were maddeningly inconsistent. Some articles said HOAs had broad authority to publish violation information. Others suggested it could be considered defamation if applied selectively. Legal blogs warned that privacy expectations in HOA communities were limited. But none of it was clear. On one forum, a lawyer wrote, while HOAs may share violation information with the board, making it public to the entire community, especially with identifying details, could open them up to claims of selective enforcement or invasion of privacy. That phrase stuck with me, selective enforcement. It sounded exactly like what was happening. Others had received violations before, but never once had their addresses been listed in the meeting agenda. Why us? I brought it up with Carl during one of our morning walks. Selective enforcement, I said, testing the words. Doesn't that mean they're applying rules unevenly? Carl nodded. Exactly. And if they're singling you out, that's a big deal. But proving it? That's another story. Do you think I should bring it up at the meeting? Absolutely. Even if they don't like it, you'll put them on notice. And maybe next time they'll think twice before broadcasting someone's address like that. His encouragement steadied me. Still, I couldn't shake the nerves. Blank, underscore, blank, by midweek, my wife had turned into my coach. Keep your voice calm, she reminded me. Don't let them bait you. Stick to the facts. The violation, the agenda, the selective enforcement. I know, I said, pacing the living room with my notes in hand. But what if my voice shakes? What if they laugh it off? Then you keep going, she said firmly. Remember, you're not just speaking for us. You're speaking for everyone who could be next. That hit me hard. She was right. This wasn't just about our trash can. It was about setting a precedent. If they could shame us, they could shame anyone. Blank, underscore, blank. I even considered calling a lawyer. I drafted an email to one I found online, but stopped before hitting send. Part of me worried it would escalate things too far, too fast. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to spend hundreds of dollars just to fight a $100 fine. Still, I saved the draft, just in case. Instead, I focused on preparing my speech. I wrote it out longhand, then read it aloud in front of the mirror. Good evening, my name is, I live at, address, I began, my voice echoing in the bathroom. I'm here tonight because I believe the HOA has crossed a line. Not only by fining me for something as minor as a trash bin visible for 14 minutes on a holiday, but by publishing my address in the meeting agenda for the entire community to see. I believe this is selective enforcement and a violation of my privacy. I paused, imagining the faces of the board members. I am not here to cause trouble, I continued. I am here to ask for fairness. If the rule is that all violations are published publicly, then so be it, but apply it equally. If not, then explain why my family was singled out. Because right now, it feels less like enforcement and more like public shaming. Hearing the words out loud gave me a strange mixture of fear and strength. Blank, underscore, blank, on Thursday night, my wife sat across from me at the table, holding her phone up like a microphone. Again, she said. I groaned. Do we have to? Yes. One more time. So I launched into it again, stumbling here and there, but gradually finding rhythm. Each repetition made the speech feel more natural, more like my own words instead of a script. When I finished, she smiled. That's it. That's the version. You really think so? I know so, she said. You'll be fine. Blank, underscore, blank. Still, the anxiety crept in. At night I lay awake, picturing worst-case scenarios. The board members dismissing me with smirks. Neighbors whispering behind my back. The possibility of retaliation, sudden inspections, nitpicky violations, more fines. But then I thought of the principle. 14 minutes. 14 minutes had become a scarlet mark on our record. If I didn't push back, what would they try next? By Saturday, I had made peace with it. It's just one night, I told myself. One room, one speech. Then it's over. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't really be over. No matter what happened, the meeting would leave its mark. It was a showdown between common sense and bureaucracy, between privacy and control. And I was walking straight into the middle of it. Blank, underscore, blank, on the morning of the meeting, I set my folder on the kitchen counter. Inside were the violation notice, the agenda with our address circled in red, my notes, and a printed copy of the county's waste management schedule, my small arsenal of truth. My wife put a hand on my arm. We'll get through this, she said softly. I nodded, but my heart was already pounding. That evening, as we drove to the clubhouse, the sky over Palm Beach turned a fiery orange. The palms swayed gently in the humid breeze, as if mocking the storm gathering inside me. The clubhouse came into view, its beige stucco walls glowing in the sunset. Cars lined the parking lot. Neighbors filed in through the glass doors, their conversations buzzing with anticipation. I tightened my grip on the folder. It was time. The clubhouse smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, its fluorescent lights buzzing like nervous insects. Folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, most already occupied by neighbors in polo shirts, sundresses, and the occasional beach hat still clinging to the day's sunshine. At the front sat the board, 7 members lined behind a long table, their name placards propped up like little shields of authority. Beside them, the property manager shuffled papers, whispering instructions. I slid into a seat halfway down the row, clutching my folder. My wife sat beside me, her hand brushing mine briefly, a silent squeeze of support. Around us, I caught snippets of conversation, budgets, landscaping, complaints about pool hours. But beneath it all, I felt the undercurrent, a buzz of curiosity. People had read the agenda. People knew. The meeting began in the usual monotone. A call to order, a roll call, approval of last month's minutes. Then came reports. Finances, landscaping, maintenance. My heart drummed faster with each item ticked off. I barely heard the numbers, the bids, the votes. All I could see in my mind was the bold line in the agenda. Our address, trash receptacle violation. Finally, the president cleared his throat. Next item. Violations to be voted on. The room hushed. The property manager flipped through her folder and began to read. Violation number 1. Address. Trash receptacle left visible from the street for 14 minutes after pickup on July 4th. Fine of $100 issued. Board to vote on enforcement. There it was. Out loud. My address, my crime, my humiliation, spoken in front of 30 of my neighbors. I felt heat rise in my face. My wife stiffened beside me. Around the room, I saw heads turn. Some eyes flicked to me briefly before darting away. A few neighbors frowned, others smirked faintly, as if amused by the absurdity. One man in the back whispered something to his wife. She covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. I wanted to sink into the chair and vanish. Instead, I gripped the folder tighter. The president looked around the board. Discussion? One board member, a man in a crisp polo, leaned forward. Wasn't this the family that emailed back with the holiday pickup schedule? The property manager nodded. Yes, they responded with an explanation. However, the compliance team noted that the trash receptacle was visible beyond the required timeframe, regardless of holiday scheduling. A murmur rippled through the audience. I heard the word, ridiculous, whispered somewhere behind me. Another board member, a woman with sharp glasses, frowned. 14 minutes? Is that even enforceable? The property manager adjusted her notes. The rules state that trash bins must be removed from view immediately after collection. Immediately? The woman repeated. What does that even mean? Within 5 minutes? 10? The man in the polo shrugged. That's why we're here to vote. The president tapped his pen against the table. Any motion? Before anyone could answer, I stood. My knees wobbled, but my voice, though shaky, was loud enough to carry. Excuse me, homeowner comments are usually later in the meeting, but since my address has been read aloud, I'd like to respond now. The president raised an eyebrow, then nodded reluctantly. Proceed. Keep it brief. I walked to the small podium at the side, folder in hand. My palms were damp, my chest tight, but once I set the papers down and looked at the board, something steadied inside me. Good evening. My name is, I live at, address. I'm here because I believe the HOA has crossed a line. Not just by fining me for a trash bin visible for 14 minutes on a holiday, but by publishing my address in the agenda and reading it aloud tonight. A few murmurs rose from the audience. I pressed on. I understand the need for rules. I respect the idea of maintaining standards. But 14 minutes on July 4th? That's not enforcement, that's nitpicking. And to make matters worse, our address was broadcast to the entire community. To my knowledge, this has never been done before. This feels like selective enforcement, and it feels like public shaming. The woman with the sharp glasses leaned back, her expression thoughtful. The man in the polo pursed his lips. I held up the agenda. If violations are to be public, then make them all public. Apply the rule equally. Otherwise, why us? Why now? I'd like to know. For a moment, silence. Then a low murmur spread through the audience again. Agreement, whispers, even a few claps quickly hushed. The president frowned. Thank you for your comments. The board will consider them. Please return to your seat. I did, my heart racing, but a weight lifted slightly. The words were out. The record was made. Blank. Blank. The board turned to deliberate. The man in the polo spoke first. We can't set the precedent of ignoring violations just because they're minor. Rules are rules. The woman with the glasses shot back, but this is absurd. 14 minutes? On a holiday? Are we really spending community resources debating this? Another member chimed in. And the publication of their address, was that necessary? I don't recall us ever doing that before. The property manager shifted uncomfortably. It was an attempt at transparency. But perhaps it should have been anonymized. The audience buzzed louder. Someone muttered, "Transparency, my foot." A ripple of laughter followed. I sat frozen, torn between fear and relief. Fear that they might still uphold the fine. Relief that at least some board members seemed to see the insanity of it. The president tapped the gavel lightly. Let's have order. We'll proceed to a vote shortly. But first, let me say this. Our goal is not to shame residents. Our goal is compliance and consistency. If this process created the impression of unfairness, we will revisit our procedures. The murmurs subsided slightly. But in that moment, one truth was clear. The spotlight was no longer just on me. It was on them, on the HOA itself, and the ridiculousness of its obsession with 14 minutes of trash can visibility. The air inside the clubhouse was thick with unease. The board shuffled papers and exchanged glances, while the audience, my neighbors, sat forward in their chairs, eager for the drama to unfold. I had said my piece, and now it was up to them. The president cleared his throat. All right, we've heard the homeowners' concerns. Let's deliberate. The man in the polo spoke first, his voice sharp and clipped. We can't undermine our own rules. If we make an exception for 14 minutes, then why not 20? 30? Next thing you know, people will be leaving bins out overnight. A few heads in the audience shook, and someone muttered, "That's a stretch." The woman with the sharp glasses leaned forward. With respect, that's nonsense. This isn't about 30 or 40 minutes. This is about a family who brought their bin in promptly on a holiday. They're being punished for something that barely qualifies as an infraction. Another board member, a soft-spoken older man, raised his hand slightly. What troubles me more is that their address was published. That's a new practice, isn't it? I don't recall us ever including addresses before. The property manager adjusted her notes nervously. It was meant to be transparent. So residents could see what issues were being addressed. Or so residents could gossip, the older man countered. A ripple of agreement spread through the room. The president raised a hand. Let's keep the discussion professional. Blank. I sat rigid, heart-hammering, trying not to betray the storm inside me. I half expected the board to double down out of pride, to defend the violation just to prove their authority. But as the debate continued, cracks widened in their confidence. The woman with the glasses pushed harder. We have to consider proportionality. Is this truly the kind of behavior we want to police? Do we really want to fine families for being 14 minutes late? And then shame them publicly? What message does that send? The man in the polo scowled. The message is that rules matter. Without consistency, the community falls apart. Someone in the back snorted. Yeah, 14 minutes is really gonna destroy Palm Beach. Laughter rippled through the audience, light but pointed. Even the president cracked a reluctant smile. He quickly composed himself, tapping the gavel. Let's move to a motion. Do we have one? The woman with the glasses raised her hand. I move to rescind this violation, refund the fine, and formally adopt a policy that violation addresses are not to be published on agendas. The older man nodded immediately. Second, blank, underscore, blank. The president straightened in his chair. Very well. All in favor? Hands rose one by one. First the woman, then the older man, then two others. 4, 5. Finally, a sixth. All opposed? Only one hand stayed up. The man in the polo, his jaw set tight. The president looked around. The motion passes. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the room erupted in murmurs, chuckles, even scattered applause. A few neighbors clapped openly. Someone whispered, "About time." My wife squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The president tapped his gavel again. Order, please. Order. He paused, then looked directly at me. The violation has been rescinded. The fine will be refunded. And going forward, violation addresses will not be included on public agendas. It was as close to an apology as I was ever going to get. Blank, underscore, blank. After the vote, the meeting limped through its remaining agenda items, landscaping bids, pool repairs, routine approvals, but the energy in the room had shifted. The board looked chastened, while the audience seemed invigorated, as if they'd witnessed something rare, bureaucracy bending to common sense. When the meeting adjourned, neighbors filtered out in groups, buzzing with commentary. Carl clapped me on the back. You did it, he said, grinning. You actually did it. Maria approached with a smile. That was brave. Most people wouldn't have spoken up. I think you made them realize how ridiculous this whole thing was. Even people I barely knew stopped to offer nods of approval. Good job, one man said. Someone needed to say it. I felt a strange mixture of pride and exhaustion. It wasn't just about the $100 anymore. It was about the principle, and for once, the principle had won. Blank, underscore, blank. Outside, the humid night air felt cooler, lighter. The street lamps cast soft halos on the pavement as neighbors chatted in small groups. I caught snippets of conversation. 14 minutes? Can you believe it? They really thought they could get away with that? Glad it's over. They've been getting too strict lately. It was surreal. Just days ago, I had felt like a pariah, my address printed like a scarlet letter for all to see. Now, the narrative had flipped. I wasn't the villain. I was the guy who stood up, the one who pushed back against absurdity. My wife smiled as we walked to the car. See? You were worried for nothing. I shook my head, still processing. Not for nothing. That could have gone the other way. But at least now, maybe they'll think twice before pulling this stunt again. Blank, underscore, blank. As we drove home, the streets of our neighborhood looked different. The identical houses, the trimmed hedges, the rows of beige mailboxes, they all seemed less oppressive, less suffocating. For once, I felt like the balance of power had shifted, even if only slightly. But I also knew this wasn't the end. HOAs thrived on rules, and rules had a way of multiplying. Today it was trash cans. Tomorrow, it could be lawn height, mailbox flags, or holiday lights. There would always be another battle, another absurdity waiting in the wings. Still, as we pulled into our driveway, I glanced at the garage door where the trash bin sat hidden inside, safe and compliant. I couldn't help but chuckle. 14 minutes. That tiny sliver of time had turned into a showdown, a spectacle, and a victory. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks after the meeting, life in our little corner of Palm Beach County returned, on the surface, to normal. The lawns were still trimmed within an inch of perfection, sprinklers still hissed every morning, and the same parade of joggers and dog walkers filled the sidewalks at dusk. But for me, nothing looked quite the same anymore. Every time I rolled the trash bin to the curb, I thought of that violation notice, the stopwatch precision, the smug insistence on immediate removal, the absurdity of being fined for 14 minutes. And every time I brought the bin back in, I thought of the agenda, my address typed in bold for the entire neighborhood to see. But now, instead of shame, I felt something else, perspective. Blank, underscore, blank, neighbors who had once been polite but distant started stopping to chat. Good job at the meeting, one woman told me while pruning her hibiscus. You said what we've all been thinking. At the pool, a man I barely knew pulled me aside. I had a violation last year, Christmas lights left up too long. They threatened to fine me $50 a day. I paid it just to make it go away. I wish I'd spoken up like you did. Even teenagers in the neighborhood got in on it. One evening, a kid rode by on his bike and shouted, 14 minutes, before laughing and pedaling off. It became a kind of inside joke, shorthand for the ridiculousness of law enforcement. For the first time, I realized how much silent resentment had been simmering beneath the surface. People had felt powerless, afraid to rock the boat. My case had cracked the veneer, showing that the board could be challenged, and even defeated. Blank, underscore, blank, of course, not everyone was thrilled. The man in the polo shirt, the lone board member who had voted against rescinding the fine, now avoided eye contact when walking his dog. If we passed on the sidewalk, he offered only a curt nod, his jaw tight. I wondered if he saw me as a troublemaker, someone who had undermined the authority he valued so much. But if that was the price of standing up, I was willing to pay it. Blank, underscore, blank, the bigger question lingered. Was this truly a violation of privacy? Legally, maybe it was murky. HOAs wielded broad authority in Florida, and the lines between transparency and exposure were blurred. But emotionally, morally, it felt clear. Publishing my address for a trivial violation had been invasive, humiliating, and unnecessary. What struck me most was the intent behind it. Was it really about transparency? Or was it about control? About sending a message to the community that no one was beyond scrutiny? If it was the latter, it backfired. Blank, underscore, blank, one evening, sitting on the porch with my wife, I reflected aloud. You know, it's strange. I thought the worst part was them putting our address out there. But maybe the best part is that everyone saw how ridiculous it was. If it had stayed private, it would have just been us against them. But because it was public, the whole community got to see the absurdity in the open. She sipped her iced tea thoughtfully. So they tried to shame us, and instead they shamed themselves. I nodded. Exactly. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the cicadas. It was true. The act meant to embarrass us had exposed the HOA instead, revealing the pettiness of their enforcement and the fragility of their authority. Blank, underscore, blank, over the following months, the newsletters from the HOA changed subtly. Violation sections were worded more vaguely, no names, no addresses. Just several residents reminded of compliance. It was clear they had learned something from the backlash. The property manager even sent out a formal notice. In the interest of protecting resident privacy, violation details will no longer be shared publicly in agendas. It wasn't an apology, but it was a concession. Blank, underscore, blank, for me, the whole saga became more than just a story about a trash bin. It became a story about boundaries between rules and reason, authority and abuse, privacy and exposure. I realized how fragile dignity can feel when someone else holds the power to define your behavior as non-compliant. 14 minutes of a trash bin on a holiday became a scarlet letter, not because of the bin itself, but because of the way it was framed, displayed, and broadcast. But I also realized something else. Absurdity has power too. When rules stretch too far, they expose themselves. They stop looking like order and start looking like parody. And when that happens, people stop being afraid. They start laughing. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The night of the meeting, I walked in fearing humiliation. I walked out hearing laughter, directed not at me, but at the absurdity of the system. That was the real victory. Even now, when I see my neighbors chuckle about 14 minutes, I feel a strange pride. Not because I sought the spotlight, but because, for once, the spotlight revealed the truth. Blank. Underscore. Blank. One Saturday morning, as I wheeled the bin back into the garage, Carl strolled over. "Funny thing," he said. "Since your case, I've noticed the compliance SUV hasn't been prowling as much. Almost like they're afraid of writing another ticket for something silly." I grinned. Maybe they finally realized they don't need a stopwatch to run a neighborhood. Carl laughed. "Here's hoping." We stood there for a moment, watching the sprinklers dance across the lawns. For the first time in a long time, the community felt less like a prison of rules and more like a neighborhood again. Blank. Underscore. Blank. That night, I wrote in my journal. They tried to shame us, but in the end, they only reminded everyone how absurd the system can be. And sometimes, that's the beginning of change. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a trash can. It was about control, dignity, and the fragile balance of suburban life. It was about the lines we draw around privacy, and what happens when someone crosses them. And maybe, just maybe, it was about the fact that laughter, shared, genuine laughter, can be the strongest form of rebellion.
Thanks for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. Have you ever dealt with something this absurd in your own neighborhood? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode.